PHP code to do this for you. Another very important module which you'll find across all Drupal installations these days is called views. Now views is a dynamic way of accessing information to display it. Because typically if you go through the module will have to define how you display this information in code. And often people want to be able to manipulate this information in different ways. So maybe show like just the teaser of the latest articles that have been added in a block on the left. And it was very difficult to do that without having to actually edit the code in the past. Now with views you can essentially define your SQL query, it's a visual definition of a SQL query to your database to pull your information out and display it. So typically those are the core modules plus WYSIWYG editor, CCK module, views, and I'll personally say the capture modules if you go to your public website. All of our websites that we do in Drupal, we have to put the captures down, but otherwise, even on the contact us form, we'll just keep on emailing you, selling you fake watches and stuff like that. Okay. So before I go on to the Drupal architecture, let's see if I can quickly bring up an instance of Drupal to take you through something, give you a bit more of a hands-on feel for the application. I actually had it set up on my other laptop, but that wasn't working, so I just want to make sure I've got it installed. Okay, there's Drupal 6.0. So that's that for the sort of look and feel of Drupal itself. Let me just go back to the architecture. Okay, so Drupal, if this is getting more to the sort of development side of Drupal, everything is a node. So it's sort of semi-object orientated in the sense that all your content types derive from a node, and then you can say, okay, it's a node, so it has to have a subject and a body, but you also want to add, it must have a province, a date timestamp, or and let's say belong to some kind of category that you want to select from a list. So you will then extend the node types by writing Drupal modules to do that. Drupal runs on the LAMP stack, which basically means it runs on Apache and PHP, and you can use MySQL or any PostgreSQL as a database backend. Drupal itself is not an object-orientated API or framework. It's very much of a sort of a procedural kind of code, but your code gets called in version of control, the framework calls your code. So if you look at the API, so if you want to display a block when Drupal goes through its boot cycle and what's called basically it's like the life cycle of creating a page. It will search within your code to find certain functions and then call that function to output basically HTML to insert into the template. One of the, as I said before, the APIs are well thought out and documented. I don't know whether it's just me, more of a developer, and I find it very easy to use and understand and intuitive. And if you're trying to figure out how to do something, you sort of think of what the name would logically be called. And you can find it quite quickly in the API documentation. So that makes it very easy to extend. One of the functions I also want to mention about Drupal, I think it makes it quite a powerful solution for the IT department that's providing services to a whole bunch of other departments, is a multi-site option. Because what you can do is you can have one code base that you install, but you can have many sites feeding off of that code base, and each have their own template, their own content. It is possible to share content between sites as well, and also things like users, so you can do integration between the sites. But the biggest benefit of this from an administration point of view, when patches come out and you need to update the system, you only have to update one code base. And one thing about Drupal is they release patches quite often, so that can become a nightmare to have to sort of patch 10 different websites when you can just patch one and have it automatically all execute up as a client across all 10 websites. So a lot of people use that, particularly in multi-hosted environments as well. If somebody's providing Drupal hosting to you, they'll set up as a multi-site option so they can make sure that they're applying all the security patches to all of their client sites. So just in general, some good practice around Drupal. With all of these content management systems, when people get it, the first thing they start doing is looking for modules that can extend it. And that's great, but not all modules are created equal. It's good to sort of find the core modules that you know are well maintained. Of any open source project, you should always make sure that when you decide to build something on that you're going to be reliant on, that there's a community behind it that's active, that's making releases, that's providing patches to that particular module. sometimes people go and they'll find a module, or they need a calendar module. They'll go and deploy it. It's been out for like 2 months and it never gets developed any further. And if there's any bugs, no one's going to fix it. So when you're applying third-party modules to your Drupal site, make sure that you sort of do some kind of analysis on it and understand the risks involved when you're selecting it. If you find a module that you must have, but it doesn't necessarily tick all the tick boxes around having a good documentation, having been in existence for a couple of years, and having a whole lot of, if you look at their bug list, are people logging bugs, are people closing bugs, all those kind of things, then you must just know, you can use it, but you might have to end up maintaining that yourself. And as I said, also applying the security updates is quite important, but luckily with the later version of Drupal, it's built in, it will tell you that there's an update to apply. Just on Drupal and the module system, just to clarify about it, Drupal is extensible by modules. And if you go to the Drupal website and look at the modules, there's literally thousands of modules that people have developed that are available to download. One of the challenges around Drupal that there's no site you can really go to and rate the module and see, okay, is this module generally accepted by the community as being stable and good? So for example, modules like views and CCK, okay, and the WYSIWYG editors, those you can rely on. If you've got a particular requirement, so the department comes to you and says we need to be able to show events or calendars or be able to do something which link into Twitter or whatever it is, you can find those modules, but just make sure you do your homework around them and understand what you're getting into. Because often they can become more of a nightmare than anything else. Okay. What are the cons of Drupal? Okay, some people say they're cons to Drupal. One of them they say is usability. If you look at the administration screen, it doesn't look very pretty. It intimidates a lot of people when they first see it. Typically, people often compare Joomla and Drupal together, and Joomla has much more of it's got nice big icons, it appeals to people, it's less scary. Okay? So that's why a lot of people also initially take to Joomla quite a lot. And this is a recognized problem with Drupal, that they're working quite hard to actually make the administration screen look a bit easier. There's a bit of a steep learning curve on how to use Drupal, especially if you're sort of doing the application development around it. You have to really get into understand the APIs before you can start moving forward. And I think the biggest drawback for me on Drupal is backward compatibility. Their philosophy is that they would rather break backward compatibility to add new features or improve features and keep it backwardly compatible. Okay? And 1.5 years or 2 years goes by pretty quickly, and before you know it, you're stuck on Drupal 5, Drupal 6 out. To move your site, upgrade to Drupal 6 is a whole bunch of work that you're going to have to do. Typically the core Drupal will allow you to upgrade in some kind of upgrade script, but it depends on the modules that you've got. So if you stick with the main modules, they will obviously provide some kind of upgrade script that you have to run to upgrade it. But if you've got some lesser supported module, you might find you have to basically rewrite that module yourself to fit it with the new Drupal APIs and stuff. Okay, and just quickly a bit about Jumping Bean. We've got a site called learndrupal.coza. Learn Drupal is where we basically trying to provide materials for people about Drupal, and also when we run our courses from, people can sign up for courses from there. We provide general Linux support and application development in Java and PHP, and also obviously Drupal development. We're Red Hat and Drupal partner. Okay. And the products that we have, the one I want to mention in particular is called User for Desktop. Basically, it's desktop virtualization, so it allows you to turn one PC into 10 workstations. Essentially, you fill the workstation with dual head video cards. You can put 5 of them in a box, or it's limited basically by your maximum 5, but it's limited by your motherboard's expansion slots. And recently, they had a rollout in Brazil. The Brazil government rolling out desktops for all of the school children, 400,000 workstations, and also working on something similar in Ecuador for that. Okay. And that's it. If there's any questions.